Just waiting on YouTube to pick up the stream. All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. Today we're going to talk about a wonderful battle that we had yesterday called An Encounter in Hesse. It was based on an 1813 operation of Napoleon. He basically sent troops across the Rhine, and you had a coalition force of Austrians and Prussians who were arrayed to stop him. Now, at that point, of course, the history comes to an end and the Kriegsspiel begins. And in yesterday's battle, we learned some really cool lessons. And one of the neat things about Kriegsspiel is it helps you to understand why sometimes good commanders make dumb decisions. Why didn't Lee go around to the left? Why did Napoleon lose at Waterloo at all? There's all these there's all these occasions in history where we sit back and we say, well, I would have done that differently. I can't believe they didn't see that one coming, whatever it may be. And yesterday's battle was exactly one of those experiences, in particular for me. So what ended up happening was I was placed in charge of the Austrian coalition, and initially I had no cavalry. I had three regiments. Each of these blocks is a battalion block, just so you know the scale. And I was in charge of all of this because I was the most experienced player. None of my subordinates, including when I got my third subordinate who commanded the cavalry, none of them had played before or at least had very much experience. So I had a lot of new players. Conversely, on the other side, Peter Freyer was commanding, obviously a very experienced player. He also had a couple of additional veteran players, which I think helped to make a difference. And so we're going to find that as this battle unfolds, the lack of experience of the new players actually weighed heavily on the outcome. But let's see here and let's talk about what happened. So the initial strategy, we initially did not have this cavalry. And yeah, the pieces are going crazy. It's a 3D map that auto created, which is really cool, but anytime you create a 3D map, you get really weird physics behavior. So I apologize if that's a little irksome. But let's take a look here at the initial strategy. One of the things that we did was we identified this terrain here, that there's sort of this irrigation canal or ditch, if you will, that's running through here as actually a network of them. And this creates a soft marshy ground in this area. And so we identified this as particularly defensible terrain because if the enemy has to come through this marshy area, and then behind it are these hills, as you can see here, this is ideal for the defense because the infantry is going to cross through that mud. They're going to become slowed and disorganized, and the artillery on these heights can fire down on them. And basically, once they are softened up by artillery and the mud, the infantry can go in and deliver the final assault. We also ended up getting cavalry at the end of our planning phase, and we had a generous allocation of lancers in particular. Let's see, where did I put those blocks? But we had, this many battalions, 6 battalions of lancers, and I can't move the screen further over. But right here, these lancers, and then of course you had 6 battalions of dragoons. So what was decided was we have to see the French coming. We don't know where they're at. All we know is they're in the vicinity of Munzenberg. We don't know where they're headed. We don't know where the Schwerpunkt is going to be. But looking at the road network, we identify a few different possible avenues. So obviously the obvious one is here, Bellersheim to Trezehorf, or also here, they could come up like this, or like this, but this here was identified as a likely avenue of approach. They could also come here in the south, right here, or they could come in the north to the town of Hungen, which interested me because this looks like a particularly defensible location. this particular town here. So, expecting these attacks here, the plan was relatively simple. What we're going to do is we're going to send the dragoons to scout these locations here. Dragoons would set up along these locations, and their orders are not to fight, don't engage, fall back, but basically scout and report back what you see. This is a really tough job, and it was unfortunately given to a brand new player. I hope that guy was not discouraged by the task he was given, because it was difficult. It's very difficult to run forces that are detached like this. And in addition to this, I had him post his lancers, gave him the option of either here in Langsdorff or in Hungen, post the lancers up there, because once the French come in, we wanted the lancers to come in and attack the rear and cut up any retreating units. So I think that was a pretty sound plan that we came up with. The problem, of course, with plans is they don't survive first contact with the enemy. And that's pretty much what we encountered here when we started to move. So the forces go into motion, and I'm able to set up here, and I go forward and I set up a temporary headquarters here at Treselorf. And the idea is, with this cavalry being out here, these scouts, they can report back to me, and it will be a little faster than having to climb the hills and get up here to Steinheim, where the primary force is situated. So I posted there. One of my subordinates posted down here at Unterwittersheim, and the other one I told to go ahead and go on to Hungen, because it's just such a defensible location. So that's where all these forces ended up being established. Okay, so far so good, right? Let's see here if we can situate the pieces roughly where they were. Roughly. Okay. Now, the French, we don't get a lot of reports, except we do hear, I think, that the French are around in this area here. And what they were actually doing is they were actually holding position. But getting confirmation that they were in this area here led credence to the idea that they're going to take this middle approach, which is what we thought they were going to do. And in reality, what Peter came up with was a two-pronged approach. He wanted to hit the flanks on either side, which I remember commenting on the live stream, that would be our worst nightmare, and we need to guard against that. That he could try to go right and left at the same time and ignore the center, in which case we would be pretty far apart, and the units would not be able to support each other. So that was a concern. In any case, we're trying to scout the enemy, and things start to go not according to plan pretty quick. What happens is the French come up here. They get a cavalry unit that we spot coming through here. Now, cavalry coming through here, I'm thinking, well, if they turn right, I'm going to be in trouble. I had 2 battalions with me. That's not enough to resist the whole cavalry force. So I ordered the battalions to fall back to Steinheim, which is the primary defensive position. So that was fine. But I also expected he would either turn right or turn north. Instead, he did what I absolutely did not expect, was he turned left. And the problem with him turning left is, guess what I have out here in Bellersheim? Well, I have a squadron of dragoons. Let's get a block out here. Actually, it's not me, it's the new guy, right? But he has his dragoons out there, and all of a sudden he gets sandwiched between forces coming 2 directions, and this unit, of course, gets destroyed. And the problem with that is it's very discouraging, especially for a new player, to have one of your units destroyed like that. Even though they're a scouting force and it's kind of assumed, they're going to take that extra level of risk, and this is going to happen. It can be discouraging. And so morale matters in these things. Obviously, it's actually a major factor. It's probably more important a factor than the actual numbers and positions on the board. So once a player loses their heart, if you will, their will to resist, it can be hard. Now, I can't say that that happened in this case, but it could not have been psychologically helpful to lose one of the blocks. In any case, the cavalry ends up coming back to Hungen and consolidating there. And of course, we're still here waiting. In order to get advance warning, my player down here in the south begins sending his units up around here to this town, to this location. And he is trying to scout, he's trying to see, and for whatever reason, he starts to send more units. It's a true, what we would call Daniel Sickles moment, where he advances to what he thinks is better terrain. The problem is, in doing so, he's departing from the plan. At one point, he does send a unit to Trezohoff, and that's because I told him to cover the south. And the reason for that is I received reports that the French were coming in the north, that they were approaching in the north. So knowing that they're approaching in the north, I'm like, well, if that's where their main attack is going to be, I need to move my 8 battalions up there to support and block that attack. So we begin marching in column here to get up there and deal with that. I don't receive reports. I go ahead, and when I arrive, I speak to the commander. And I'm like, okay, what are you up against? And he's like, well, we don't see anything. They were there, and then they're gone. And so now I'm thinking, okay, so he saw some cavalry. There was a diversion. Something happened, but the forces turned around, whatever. So obviously, I don't need to be up here with 15 battalions. Well, 14 technically, if I can add, right? I don't need to be up here with all this force, with my middle and my south being covered by one regiment with 6 battalions. He could totally come through the center, just punch right through. There'd be nothing there to stop him. He could even punch south. There'd be nothing to resist him. So I actually countermarched my column. I'm like, I don't need to be here. The problem with this is my subordinate was in fact facing the main enemy effort, but he didn't recognize it. He didn't understand it. The Empire did try to help me out. He told me there's a lot of dust out there, but what does that mean? That could be refugees. It could be cavalry running around in circles. There's no way to know that what we're seeing here is in fact the main French effort. So as a consequence, I turn around because I'm sensitive about this hole in our center. Well, eventually we start getting reports that the French are coming down in the south, and they're coming this way. We'll draw the line. There's a long column. I actually encounter them here. I tell my artillery to open fire on them, which drives them off, and they keep moving south. Well, as they move south, I get reports from my commander in the south. Hey, the French are coming. I need some help. So I come down here, and to my horror, I learned that he is engaged clear out here. This is not the plan. The plan is to stay back here, and instead he's deployed pretty far forward. So, of course, predictably, he gets smashed. I have this moment where I have to choose to either go forward and feed troops into this fray, or stay back here and stick with the plan. I choose to stick with the plan, because I think if I go forward and feed my units into the meat grinder piecemeal, they'll be destroyed. So I order him to retreat back to the line. I provide a reserve for him to rally on, and he begins to do so. Around the same time, I get a report from the north saying, hey, we're facing 6 battalions. Well, okay, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Plus the cavalry, what's left of it, which is actually quite a bit, is also here. So I'm thinking, okay, you got 6 battalions. You have 2 regiments or a whole regiment, at least probably 2 regiments of cavalry, and you're telling me that you're facing 6 battalions. You should be able to hold against that. If anything, that confirms for me that the main enemy effort is in the south. So again, I stick to the southern strategy. They're going to come here. They're going to come through like this, and we need to block this. And I begin positioning for that. And that's when the battle comes to an end. And the battle came to an end because what actually happened was, as I'm maneuvering down here in the south, getting ready to receive the main attack, we learn this is just a large cavalry force, and the main infantry just smashed the defenses at Hungen and is about to power through. And there you have it. So why did this happen? Well, for one, my subordinate in the north did not see more than 6 battalions, but that doesn't mean that they're not there. There were many more troops there, and perhaps lack of experience, and the cavalry, which should have been scouting, was back here in town more or less licking its wounds. I did order him to scout, and he may have sent some blocks out, but for whatever reason, we didn't get the intel. We didn't get the reports back. So the end result is the main blow lands in the north without me really being aware of it. A secondary blow lands in the south, and because my southern commander did not follow the plan, he gets smashed and has to retreat. And I spend the whole battle marching and counter-marching without ever being engaged. And I happen to command the main body of the coalition forces. So it's a pretty handy French victory. Peter says, he thinks luck had a lot to do with it, possibly. But ultimately, I think experience is what it comes down to. You can't blame new players for making new player mistakes because they're likely to do so. And the other thing is, even if I had veteran players, it's not a sure guarantee of victory. But at the end of the day, I can only use the information that's given to me by my subordinates. And if the information given to me is inaccurate or flawed, or if I don't make sense of it in the correct way, then I'm not going to behave optimally, and we're going to get defeated. And that's what happens. And the thing is, that happens on both sides. That happens to all commanders all the time. The reports that you get are not going to be very effective. They're going to be incomplete. They're going to be confusing. And at a certain point, you have to make some guesses. And if your guesses are wrong, well, you're going to pay the consequence of those wrong guesses. And again, that just happens all the time. So if you want to know why somebody like Lee loses at Gettysburg or Napoleon loses at Waterloo or whatever, there are reasons for it, and the reasons aren't that these people that their brains failed them. It's that the information that was given to them as it was interpreted in their mind was inaccurate, and so they made decisions based on limited or inaccurate information, and those decisions ended up being wrong. And again, this is happening on both sides of every single battle that you play, but when it just comes down to timing. Had I come north a turn later, I would have seen the French force. The French force actually materialized out of, I think, Langsdorff and came down to make their main attack the turn after I said, okay, I got to go back south, and left. So had that attack materialized while I was present, my forces would have arrived just in time to receive the attack, and things might have gone differently. So that was just the difference of one turn. And a lot of that stuff matters. Why we decided in the South to abandon the plan, I know we wanted to see what was going on, but maybe that's a vedette. Maybe that's 1 battalion. But when the bulk of the regiment is put forward into an exposed position and then gets caught in the flank, well, the plan goes away. And of course, here I am, very stubbornly sticking to the plan. Maybe I should have gone forward. Maybe I should have done something. Maybe I should have, come up like that. But if I don't have the right intel, how can I do anything? So part of it too could be my defensive mindset. I was planning on defending all battle, and it ends up we were defeated in detail, is what ends up happening. So classic Napoleonic defeat. Well, that's the lesson, folks. A little bit of a short podcast today. It was a tough lesson, but a fun battle. Again, we had the privilege of playing with Otto's pieces, which are absolutely gorgeous. They're not quite in proper order here, but you can see just how pretty they are. He does such a good job. He's quite the artist. Love the Lancer blocks. And there we have it. There we have it, folks. I am still working on my own system, which is the Kriegsspiel 2022 system. That module is in fact public, and anybody can pull it up and look at it. I'll just open it up real quick here and show it off since we have the time. And here are my blocks, and each of these are half battalion blocks. And then we have the cavalry blocks, and these blocks need to be scaled down. They're a little large. Here they need to be scaled down for actual play. But in any case, here you have your skirmish blocks and so on. So it's a very basic set, but I've begun redoing the dice, and I've also updated the rules document. And again, I've got work to do, particularly on the cavalry combat. I also need to create a dragoon block, which I have not created. I have hussars, cuirassiers, and lancers. I need to create dragoons. So there's all of that, and the dice need work. So these dice are updated. The even die and the melee die are both updated. And if I turn to rotation value 1, you see that I've highlighted here slightly that in the melee everybody takes a hit. And so on. And again, I put the rules on all the dice. So all the dice have the rules on them when you roll them, what they're for, and so on. So that makes it handy. So anyway, the module's coming along, and of course it does have more memes in it. We keep adding memes. But there you have it. Okay, well, I hope you folks get a little bit more insight into how these things work and why Kriegsspiel is such a really cool activity, because it's unlike any other war game you could ever play. And I'm sure there will be another game. Sorry, the headset gave out. There'll be another game next Saturday at 8 a.m. And away we go from there. Thank you all then for watching, and we will see you all on the next adventure. Bye for now.